Our final keynote speaker is Lisa Lavin. She is the founder, chairman, and CEO of Ōmcare, which is a digital health company that's changing the way that the world cares. So her company integrates holistic technology with pharmacy and care services to help older adults live independently and on their own terms for longer. A serial entrepreneur with over 25 years of experience in healthcare and high tech, Lisa's built businesses from the ground up with a spirit of curiosity, courage, and a relentless drive to solve meaningful problems, always striving to boldly go where no one has gone before. Before leading Ōmcare, Lisa has served on boards. She actively supports organizations that are advancing healthcare innovation and entrepreneurship, an all-around powerhouse. So please welcome Lisa.
Thanks, Ingrid. It's really a pleasure to be here. And I feel honored to have already spoken to a couple of you and kind of got the jive and the gist of this is really a really, really cool group of people. So I'm going to talk to you today about personal development. I kind of like this part because I'm going to actually get personal with you here. I'm going to tell you some personal stories that have really formed who I am today. And I'm going to start with the question, and it's a question to you to just think to yourself, do you think that you can gain without pain? Just think to yourself, and I'm kind of seeing a lot of heads that are shaking, and I'm just going to agree with you and say, hell no. And I am a prime example of there's no way that you can gain without pain. So if you're looking to gain in life, there's going to be some suffering. I'm going to tell you the story in the perspective of quarters. And I'm going to tell you a story about this constant itch that I've had throughout my career. Now, yes, you see a picture of a young child drinking beer. That is me. And, so doesn't every child just grow up drinking beer for lunch every single day? Well, you've heard of growing up in France, and when in France, they drink wine. Well, I grew up where my grandfather was an entrepreneur and he owned a beer distribution company. And so we had beer everywhere and with everything, and it just was part of the thing. But here's the deal. My grandpa, without a high school degree or not even, or let alone a college degree, started a beer distribution company that became super, super successful in Winona, Minnesota. And I had so much fun as a kid. I would hang out in his operation. I'd be, 2 stories up on top of these big, huge pallets of beer, watching these forklifts move all around and watching the operation and drinking my little sour pop and a sausage that the rep just dropped off. And I got this itch. I thought, this is really cool. I think I want to actually own my own business someday. But I had absolutely no wherewithal on how that was going to occur. And as I got older and we were nearing graduation from high school, all of my friends were making all of these plans and going into college and what school they were going to go to. And I just had no clue. I mean, literally, I had no idea what interested me. And let alone did I have an idea on how I was going to start a business. So I thought, well, what do you like? Well, I like dogs. So I decided to get into veterinary medicine, but I didn't have a whole lot of faith in myself. My grandpa did a whole lot without any education whatsoever. My mom had just a 1-year degree. And I thought, well, I don't know. I think I'll just go for a 2-year degree. And so I did. I went for an associate in applied science. I got it. And I got really, really lucky where my first job out of this 2-year school was at the University of Minnesota Veterinary Medical Center. There I was in the medical imaging department, first job, and I was teaching senior veterinary students how to take x-rays, how to do medical imaging, ultrasound. I was nuclear medicine. I did radiation therapy. I mean, I was doing it all in imaging, and I became an expert at it. And then I got lucky enough where I got a call from a vocational college. They said, hey, would you come over here and teach it? So I went over to that school and I started teaching, still only a 2-year degree. And I wrote an article for a national trade journal just because I had figured out this really unique way on how to explain x-rays and how to take images of all sorts of animals. Well, after I wrote that article, I got a call from the top publisher of veterinary medicine books to write a textbook. And I'll never forget, she said, we really want you to write a proposal to write a textbook, maybe about 350 pages, just a little thing. And I remember writing the proposal and thinking, well, I've never done this before, but yeah, I can do that. And wrote the proposal. And I remember the reviewers were veterinarians, and they looked at my proposal and said, she's only got a 2-year degree. There's no way she can do this. No, that she can't write the book. And I remember the publisher had faith in me and gave me a shot at it. And I ended up writing this textbook. And I'm glad to tell you that it's now in its 7th edition, renamed it Lavin's Veterinary Radiography. So here I am. I'm at what I think is the peak of my career, 10 years in, and written this textbook, blah, blah, blah. But I have this itch. I really, really wanted to own my own business. And it just seemed like I wasn't on that path. So I went to go see a mentor, speaking of mentoring. And I said, I really want to get into business. How do I do it? And my mentor very logically said, Lisa, if you want to get into business, you better get into business, but you got to finish your 4-year degree first. And then why don't you try sales? So I did it. I got my 4-year degree. I went to night school, working full-time still, teaching and all this kind of thing. Got my 4-year degree and went to go see a recruiter. And I'll never forget. I walked into the recruiter and I said, look, I'm an expert at medical imaging. I want to sell capital x-ray equipment for one of the big companies in healthcare, like GE or Siemens or Philips or somebody. That's what I want to do. And I'll never forget, the recruiter looked at me and he said, oh, honey, why don't you try copier sales? Feeling just totally diminished, I walked out of that office and I said, you know what, under my breath, watch me. And sure as tootin', 3 months later, I had an interview with Philips Medical Systems and I got one of the top jobs. And so in that process, one of the key lessons that I learned was in that space, personal development happens in that space between when someone says you can't do that and you do it anyway. That's personal development, is just stepping in when you're really uncomfortable. Okay, second quarter itch. I'm at Philips, right? And I'm enjoying this sales career. And all of a sudden I get a job. I get a call from a recruiter that, hey, 3M Healthcare wants you to come over and lead some business development marketing for their imaging business. And I went, I've never done marketing, but okay, I can do that. And so I went over to 3M and spent an amazing 5 years in marketing. They taught me so much. They paid for my MBA. I mean, they put me through mentoring classes and programs, and it was an absolute phenomenal experience. But I still had this itch. And I told a recruiter about this itch of wanting to start my business, some business. And so the recruiter said, well, why don't you go to a startup and learn the ropes there? And so when I got an opportunity to leave, I went to the startup and became second in command and chief operating officer of this healthcare startup. Well, unfortunately, 3 years into this role of this second in command, we hit the Great Recession. And the company went under and I was without a job. So luckily, one of my customers of this startup was looking for a COO role. It was this large orthopedic surgical group that was looking for a COO. I'd never been a COO of a large orthopedic surgical group, but yeah, okay, I'll do that. Well, folks, I hate to tell you, 3 months into this job, I knew there was a problem. I was really sensing that the culture in this organization was struggling. It was tough. I was seeing a lot of really bad things happen, and I was seeing a lot of spirits and people being crushed in this organization. So I went to the chief physician, I'll never forget this day. And I said, so how would you describe the culture here in this organization? And he said, Lisa, we're kind of like the mafia. If you're with us, you're with us. If you're against us, we'll take you out. So I knew I was in really big trouble then. And actually, then about 7 months later, I ended up having to report a bad behavior of one of our physicians with a staff member, and they fired me 2 weeks later. Now, one might say that's wrongful termination, and I would say you're right. But we were in the Great Recession. I'm the primary breadwinner of my family. I had to have a job. And so there was no way I really wanted to do any kind of suing of anything for anybody because I was afraid they would blackball me. Well, guess what? They ended up blackballing me anyway. And for the next 2.5 years, I was unemployed and didn't know anything. I didn't have any opportunities. I had followed all of the opportunities down to the bitter end and got all no's. And so for that period of time, and I will tell you, that was like the darkest period in my life was during that period. And I'll never forget, it was in the darkest moment, 2.5 years later, I had this one last idea. And that idea was to start my own company. And to me, at that point in time, it felt like the highest risk thing that I could do. But actually, it ended up being the lowest risk thing to do, is to start my own company. So I did. And my lesson in this is even in the darkest moments, sometimes you just have to believe in yourself, believe in the universe is conspiring for your greatness, and just keep stumbling toward the light, which has led me to today. I did it. I scratched the itch because the universe wasn't going to have it any other way. It was forcing me to do and scratch my itch. And so I had no idea what I was doing. Just like all along the way, I had no idea what I was doing, but I just kept stumbling toward the light. I had to raise money. I had to hire a team, develop a product, and make money. I pitched thousands of times and got 99% no's. And yet I've been able to raise over $20 million. We're over 10 years in. We've developed 2 product platforms. I've got an amazing team. And what I've learned is that growth happens when you are uncomfortable. It is the discomfort that stretches our boundaries, builds resistance, and cultivates courage. And so I ask you and leave on this note, what is your itch that is driving you forward? Thanks.
That was incredible. That was absolutely incredible. You were speaking to the perseverance that you had to have, and you just got motivated every time there was a naysayer or when
That's
somebody
right.
said no, you just kept going and going, and look at where you are now, which is amazing, and I am not surprised. But thank you for sharing that very true, authentic story with everybody.